Good. And you can see my screen now, right?
Yeah.
Yes, cool. So yeah, today's presentation is a little about what we actually have been able to achieve in this great process about making development a lot easier. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with a lot of integration, that there is a lot more steps in it than just the development. You actually need to figure out what you need to develop. We don't have a lot of intelligence around those perspectives yet, but at least we are helping in the other areas. Yeah, I'll start on with the governance perspective, and I think that is actually one of the key concepts on what you can actually do, because, well, as stated earlier, the development is just a small part of the integration developer's life. You need to also be focusing on all these other components. And yeah, if any questions or comments, either unmute yourself and say hi, or put it into the chat, and let's take it there. So it's a bit open, trying to cover some of these different things. Yeah, so governance is important, and the more of this we can automate, the easier it will be for customers and you to focus on the things that's most important for you, like creating the integration that works, supporting your businesses, and getting more partners system integrated. I think that a lot of time that when I've been working as a consultant on different projects, this part about creating documentation have sometimes taken, well, depending on the situation, maybe half of the project, and then, or the time of solving some problems, going out with business experts and getting them to approve it, and it's been some kind of a challenge actually understanding what was in this process. Documentation is probably the biggest part of the governance. How do you actually ensure that the data works, and the process? And yeah, often this is out of date. You will just see initial version, and there will not be anything really that matters to this. It will all be just fuzzy things that no one really knows about. So we have been considering this thing about transporting and making sure that whenever you've made your transport, it's actually linked really easy. So the things that we have created, we have in the ERT application created an object that we call a ticket. And a ticket is kind of a ERT object that can be linked to either your service request, ServiceNow tickets, or whatever application that you're using to handle, or where the business says, here we have something new we want you to explore. I'm not sure, are you using service request, or what are they otherwise called? Tickets, incidents, something like that. And in this ticket, we are then able to actually link all of the objects that you have used for this this transport. Sure, let me show you what this looks like. So I will create a new service request, SCR 16, finance. Demo live. we have not implemented any workflow on this this process, but it's just like a repository where you can put information around this. And with that, we've actually created the ticket. But right now, we have not specified any of the objects that we have developed for this specific purpose. So our previous approach was that we had the option here to go in and select the objects that was relevant for this, but that was a bit tedious. So you would go and search for change state, and then you'd add some of these to it, but not really optimal. So what we've done now is we've created the transport settings, and this will then go in, take your CTS transport, refresh the memory, let me just get it here. So here I've released the transport, and I think I've imported it also on my QA system, and as a way of handling this data. So now we've imported it, and what we can then see is that this one expands all the components of this, so you can actually see all objects that have been involved in this transport. And if you're just having your normal CTS transport, it can sometimes be a little difficult seeing what kind of objects is involved in this, because it's just saying, hey, you got these things, and then you need to go into the service builder, ESR repository directory, find this transport, and actually see what was in this one. So here we're speeding up that process. And then you want to import this on QA as, so we've created this, and then you want to figure out how do we actually test this. And hey, you made it? I'll mute you. Huh? Mute. Okay, good. So what we can actually do here is we have already created a repository of test cases that we want to run on this, and this makes this testing a lot easier, because we know if you have added a message mapping or a communication channel, what are actually the objects that you need to test, and then we can just add this. We can run these tests either on our QA or development system. I'll just wait with that. So one of the other things that is a bit frustrating is if you, for instance, have a communication channel like this one. This is a part of the one I'm transporting. So here you have all of these objects, and you want to figure out how do we actually configure this across the landscape to ensure that it looks what it's supposed to. So and there are some objects here that are non-transportable, and those you want to be able to actually override in the productive system. So we will call this live demo. And the purpose of this is actually to be able to configure the landscape in one place. So instead of having to go in, create a lot of manual steps that needs to be employed or applied whenever you're configuring it in QA and production, you just have one place to add these things. And there's also password repository that you can save those information. We will then save this one. And now we can do a transport, and I have imported this on our productive system or our test system. So I don't want to take that one, I just want to take this one, and this is the one that is containing our message or our communication channel and a lot of other objects that we want to have or there are in this transport. So all the different exports will be different. Hey Neil, welcome. Yeah, so this is an open demo. If there's any questions, either unmute yourself and pop in or put them into the chat, and then I'll cover this. So I haven't scripted it that much, so it's more what you are looking for. So right now we've seen we have imported this one. If we go back, we can see all the different objects that actually exist in this. We can run our test on our developments or our QA system. Now we have imported these things. And obviously some of this could probably be configured and run in batch jobs. So once you have imported the transports, the ERT system will then see, I already know this one, and I can configure run test, and then you would actually see, hey, this transport was imported successfully and we had data on it. So there's two things I want to show you. First is this is what the communication channel looked like before. It was just called Demo 8. And now hopefully we got live Demo 8. I'm not sure if you can actually see this, but it has been able to configure this on our landscape. And that really simplifies my deployment instead of having to create something that a user must go through and figure out how it works. Yes, then let's see if our test run successfully. Unfinished. We did have some problems earlier. Yeah, so we can see that the test ran successfully. It found that there was an error up on this element, but it was ignored. So this makes the testing really simple because you already created that. And if you haven't, it's also easy to create new test cases for this. And yeah, we have a huge part on the testing part.
So I have one question.
Yep.
So is it like whatever the test case we have executed in development, the same is getting executed in QA?
Yes.
Like that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, and obviously you would expect the same result, and you can set up ignoring. So we have some here that are failing. I'm not really sure what is the reason for that. We can go in and check it. So there was something with upper and lower case that changed in the mapping. And you can then obviously go say, I either ignore that field, or you can then say, okay, I know that this needs to be created as a new test case, and this is a valid result. Obviously, you do that on the development system, change out that test case, and now this is the new result that we're expecting.
Okay.
And the way we're creating test cases is we are fetching them from the productive system or a QA development system, and then you can just reuse the same ones across. Any questions otherwise? So then we can generate a report that shows you actually what has been created in this test case or in this this process. So here you can see what object, or the overview. You can see the description we had. You can see all the different objects that has been involved in this transport. What kind of number of test cases we have, and then I believe it will also show if you have some scenarios that you haven't no test cases on, it will also write that, and then it will write report about how the testing was done, so you can actually see there was actually a problem in this test case, and it was all these things with vendor that we expected was changed, and you would change these test cases, run it again, and then you'd get a clean report. And then we can see all the transports they have that have been exported and what are the status with their imports. And then the purpose is you can then upload this to the ticketing system or solution manager, Jira, wherever you want to document what was actually changed on the specific instance. So the business user can sign off, okay, this is what we expected, or whatever your process is in that perspective. So one of the things obviously we saw is this configuration that we have and we applied. And with this we can actually see, so this was the configuration that we configured in the ERT just to show what was changed. So we can see we went in and changed this parameter on DA3 to this, from this to this. So we all know what user had made changes in the landscape at all point in time, so we can go in and check this. And we also have a way to generate the documentation. So if we check this one, you can then get a normal system documentation with all kind of relevant information. And you can see all the changes that actually have been involved in this specific test case, making it an effective document. That, and you can then obviously generate this whenever you need a new document. So that was this part about speeding up change management. Any questions? If you can also put them into the chat if you don't have an option to talk. So yeah, so we talked about CTS transports, channel configuration, and the good thing about this is you can limit the number of developers that actually need production access, and with that you know that people would not just go in and make small changes whenever they feel like it, or something what was actually bothering. You could still do it, and it will also, you would actually be able to see it in the change management tool that a user was actually in and changed something, and you can then figure out, was that really necessary, or what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, CTS, and obviously we can improve this, creating batch jobs that can run, or maybe an integration also to Charm, because as I understand, Charm does not give you really the option of getting PI data. So the changes that, I guess we don't have the option to do principal propagation. So if you look at this communication channel we have here, you can see maybe that it was created by the ET user, this change that we have. So which is our technical user, so that would be the one that's actually responsible for these changes. And I guess we could make principal propagation on, but on the other hand, when we do not have it, we know that it's all been configured as a part of the ERT application, and it's not someone that has been in and breaking the change management process. And then what we can see, I hope that answers the question, Mike. in here we have a list of all the changes that have been made on the system. And then we can obviously see if there was something that was not done. So Ilya, I guess, has been doing some changes right now, and that may not be relevant. And I can say, hey, go Ilya, that was not what we agreed on, or there may be a specific reason. We can then fix it in development and then assign it to a specific ticket. So all the audit trail exists in DAT, and it's just a lot more tightly integrated. So if actually I go in and see this, let's just take the one we have here, we can see what are all the versions that we have on this. I think right now it's just showing on one system, but it will also be able to link it to all the other systems that you have, so you can actually see how this was changed across the landscape. And I think this one is not used in any ICO, otherwise you would also see it here. So you would have all of that information there. And in all the documentations, where will you be able to see these things? Cool. I hope that answered that. Good. Yeah, testing. SAP obviously released a testing tool, and they, there's some limitations and what you can do. I've seen some of what they were releasing in SP15. It looks a little more promising, but it's still a lot of manual work on understanding what kind of tests that you have for a given scenario. And also, if you want to create it, it does take quite a long time. So our approach has been to make it as easy as possible. So if we select a number of, so what we can actually do here is we can select the number of ICOs. We can select, want to create a new test cases. How many messages we want from each one. If we have partner data, we can extract that and create specific test cases on these things. If we want to record third stage, shouldn't go into all those details, but there's a lot of settings you can create here. And then we can start it, and then it will go onto the PI system, add this small Figaf module into the processing chain. And we also have options to look at the SAP audit log as the SAP tool has, but that has some limitations that you cannot see all messages that are being processed, and it takes a lot longer to run these things. So we have, so there's a number of different options on it, and then you just have to wait till these messages will send new test cases, and you can create a test case based on that data. There will be anything here. Any questions? No.
No.
Okay, good. So what we also have, so here we have a test case that has been created before. We can see in and outgoing messages. It supports synchronous, sync, async, EDI separator and stuff like that. We also have the option to do data anonymization. So you can go and select a message and say what, for this one, I just want 3 digits. That should be all. So you have a lot of ways that you can anonymize the data with just a few clicks. We can put in a template that is called if you have HR data or financial data, you can just put it in. And that way, after we have run the test case, it still looks identical and correct. But obviously, no one would know that who Sue was. And there's a place you can go in here in the anonymization variables and create your own variables that tailors to these things. Then the last part for the PI part is the support. And what we do have here is we've just created a components-based message alert. And with this, we can actually set up new rules. And we can see here we have a payload for rule. It knows what rule it is. And here we have the description of this rule and all detailed information. We can go into our rule. If there was a payload on, we can also see that. And we can then see what kind of test message that it will give. And with this, we actually have a lot of information about what's happening in our landscape. If there was a message we could reprocess, we could set up reprocessing. And here you could put in all the information about how to actually solve this problem and make sure that the business knew how to handle it. And with that, scale out the organization or the support and automate the things that is important and be able to actually see, are there any new things that we haven't accounted for and don't have really a fix for. So instead of looking at documents about how to solve these problems, that's just a generic place you can find it. And then you have this log. You can see who made which change to it and what's going on there. And that's, yeah, all of what we've created is pretty easy to set up. We've tried to make it as simple. You just need to create the user agents, install it, and connect to agent systems, and then it's up and running. So that is all we had on the PI part, I think. Documentation, we saw that, alerting. And I guess the overall concept are actually to keep knowledge. And I know that at a lot of organizations there's a big turnover both with external consultants and also internal people. And when you leave or when someone leaves, it's pretty difficult actually to understand how do we test this, what's supposed to be working. If you had these test cases, it would be pretty simple just to say, this is what's work and this is what I can find with these data. That's the short overview of what we can do to make PI easy. I hope that was interesting. And if there's any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, I will go to CPI, which is also a place that we've been working a lot on improving. And creating like so the overall theme was, in the beginning we started just with a testing tool, but now it's more evolved and into a coherent development tool that supports the full process and making it a lot easier to handle all of these different things. So the first part is obviously to understand what was changed with a scenario. And let me just make a small scenario. Find the CPI system. And create tools that are generic across the landscape. So let me just put it here. So here's my CPI system. I have a really good scenario that I'm often using for these kind of tests called FSD. No reason why. So what we can do here is we can go in and change this Groovy scripts. So we're just adding a comment. Obviously, that will hopefully not have any effect. So we'll just save it as a new version. If it's saved as a version, we will then go back to our ERT tool. We would look at our CPI system, and then we'll be able to actually see what are the objects that you have and when were they changed. It takes a little while downloading all of these different things, but we can actually see that already now we know there was some changes in this. So we can see here this one was changed. We can go in and check our versions, and we can pretty easily see what was actually changed here in this process. I'm not really sure. Probably need to change some of the setting on this lookalike, so it will not just see that all these things. But at least you're able to see what was going on here. And what we'll do is we will then create a new ticket for this. Let me just see. So just as we had with PI, there's also a service request here. Service request. Yeah. The type really doesn't matter, but just give you an idea about what you actually have. And I guess I also needed to add this one to it. So we just assign this to so also here we have the option to configure your the landscape. So here we can. So here we have some kind of a user password. If it was a real parameter or a credential password, it would actually enable you also to do in the next version to actually do validation. Do we actually have this password defined on our productive system? And if you try then to import it, it will actually show this was not the case. So we can now go to a ticket. And we can test cases. So testing on CPI works a little differently. In the PI world, we're setting in modules. In the CPI world, we are just setting the iflow to trace mode for the 10 minutes that it's allowed to do that. Download all the different payloads that you have in that specific period of time, and then it do validations on cross of these. So now we have seen we have added this. We can run this on our system. And if we then go to open this testing template, here, because we don't get the data the same way, we need to go in, pull this, and this will then download the messages. It will then do a comparison. Let's see if it's done that. So we can see everything was okay with this test. We can then go to our transport, create a new transport for our CPI. So in PI, we are leveraging either the file-based or the CTS Plus. And I think CTS Plus is probably the best way if you want to do real validation of what's going on. And I managed to set it up in a couple of hours, so it's not that difficult to set it up. In CPI world, you don't really have that option. So you need to go in and do it yourself. In CPI you can set up CTS Plus, but it will export a full package, and that's sometimes a little too much and require a lot of maintenance. So a lot of people have actually changed their structure to fit that transport, and that's not really optimal. Now we have imported this, or created a transport, we can then import it. And we don't have extra tenants here, so what we're doing is just importing to a virtual tenant. And post-synchronization, I guess, is kind of the same thing. So if we then go to our, it will then be called QA Demo. And here you have this, so it's creating it in a new package with a new naming, and endpoints will be changed slightly. And we can then go and see those scripts and see that it has added the demo. And we can also go in and see our configuration here and see it's now changed the password credential to something else. You can generate the same kind of reports that show what you have tested with this. What is more interesting, I guess, is the scenario documentation for this. So for our scenario documentation for CPI, we've tried to actually think about what was most relevant for the user. So we've added basic information about it, whether the EAT version of this, document versions, what were all the service requests that was affecting this one. We have a list of the different sender channels, adapter types that are actually being used. We have what are the test cases that you have. It was run successfully. I guess here we're trying to make it like flat representation of what exists and what are the description we have, what are the configuration you have across the landscape, and then what are the resources and when were they changed last. So that was how we have been doing transports, and then you here also have all the relevant information in just one place, and you can see who made the changes and with what user, and it will then be the ERT agent user that's fetching these data. Monitoring. So in CPI, it's pretty difficult to monitor multiple organizations, and what we have created is we've just created a flow that allow you to, let's see, to add multiple iflows to the same one, so you can actually see what is going on in it, and you can then give users access to these specific roles or tiles, so a user can see only HR data and another user can see some other specific data. And here we can just go through the data and see what's there. We can drill in and specify we only want to see this iflow, change our date collation. We have a way of monitoring the performance of your system, CPU usage, number of messages processed per hour, and yeah, latency. Here you can see how both the iflow and how the monitoring, if there's any problems there. Yeah, so support is also a little differently in CPI because yeah, it's a different platform, but we needed to create a tool that actually make it easy to react to what's going on. So we don't have that many failures. So here we have some failure. we can see all the information about this failure, and we can go create a new rule the same way. So it's one way that you're setting up rules. Obviously, it will be different criteria and inputs, but it's one generic way that you are creating all of these rules. And once you're adding these rules, you have either you can send it to an email or you can send it to Jira or whatever. So there's a webhook on this this part. So yeah, you can take a lot to send to directly the system that makes sense for you. And you can also, so in here you can specify what kind of criteria that we want to look. So here I'm set that if the receiver is equal to log, I also want to log it. And the reason I want to do that is you may not want to fill the iflow, but just log that there was an error instead of propagating that error all the way back. Then this will be maybe a different way of handling these things. Here we can see the errors. We can go in and for some CPI flows, we even have the option to resend messages. It requires that you are adding in a module or a Groovy scripts into it that will lock the payload. So yeah, this was the short overview demo of all the different steps that we have, making it a lot easier to handle CPI development. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, do speak up or put them into the chat. And obviously, you can try this out at figaf.com/IoT. So here you can try it out, sign up, and try to run it on your own CPI tenants PI system and see how it works. And there's it will probably take you half an hour to set it up and running. It comes with a built-in database that you can run it on, and yeah, obviously for production reasons you may want to use a better database than the built-in one, but here it's at least giving some way to start and see what it's like.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, anything that you see that are missing or would be relevant to add, do let me know. I guess you have my email address, otherwise you'll probably not be here. So do reach out, and if there's any way we can help, do let me know. Cool. Yeah, so that was the full demo. And for API management, we also have the same options for managing resources, transporting them. We haven't, and we have a way of logging some errors. It's not the best way of logging it, but it does give you a way to pretty easy set up some logging on these applications. So you can actually see what's going on, and will help the processing in that perspective. Cool. Yep. Any? So yeah, thanks for joining. Hope it was useful, and you want to try it out. And if there's any challenges or problems, do reach out to me, and we'll try to set you up and get it fixed. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Stop share. Do you want to see it again, Diego? I have recorded it, so I can put it online if you want to see it and share it. Okay. Just send me an email and I'll share it with you. And I will stop the recording.